Hi, Lawrie. Thank you so
Hi.
much for coming on here and chatting with me. I'm so excited to spend some time with you. I just wanted to share with the listeners that Lawrie and I have been friends for the last, gosh, has it been a year now?
In a year, yeah, amazing.
Yes, we were in a program together, and then we were, put in a pod together, and we've been connecting and developing our friendship over the past year. And so I'm so excited to chat with you, and
Yay.
thank you for coming on.
Totally. I am so excited to be here and just to be on your podcast. That I know that putting together a podcast is so much work, and it's like a labor of love, and that yours is on and going and that I'm on it is just really, really exciting.
Yay. Well, let's get started. Let's just jump right in. I would love to hear, and I know our listeners would love to hear more about your journey and your transformation story. And I know you've got different pieces, so just wherever you feel led to share, let's just dive
Oh my
in.
God. So many pieces. Like when we met, I was at this massive crossroads in my life. Like I was in the beauty business, and I worked as a makeup artist and in operations in salons all over the country. And I was an educator and traveled a lot pre-COVID, but everything kind of changed in the beauty business at that point. And after 22 years, I was really ready to do something different anyway. And it kind of gave me permission to jump in, starting my own podcast, which was in October of 2019, that me and my best friend started a podcast just for fun, talking about healing. We were at times in our lives where we were trying to own our damage and really weed out what's going on and what motivates us to do things. And felt like the people who dig in like that are badasses, because that stuff is not easy,
Yes.
right?
Right.
It takes a really certain strength as a being to look into the things that are hurting you and figure out what to do with this stuff so it
Mhm.
doesn't get in the way of your growth and development. So we started the Badass Ladies Club podcast to talk about this and have a community around it and really support one another, the way that she and I support one another. And Jessica is so much fun, and we love our podcast, but we needed to monetize this bad boy, right? Podcasting was fun. But I was ready, to step out. And one thing that I knew so strongly was that I had this urge to help people. And traveling was such a big part of my identity, even in my work life. I traveled on the road for work, and I would go on massive bucket list vacations around the world and for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and leave my day job. My husband and I are trotting all over the place. I love, love, love traveling. And so these two things kind of came together where I wanted to start doing travel retreats and taking people places to focus on their healing. And I remember in our pod, in the
Yes.
program that you and I were in, when I was in the middle of this big idea phase where we were ideating and really trying to talk about the things we loved and how we could turn them into something we wanted to do for a living. And I was like, yeah, but people don't get paid to go on vacation with other people, do they? And you guys were like, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
You could do that. And I was like, I guess I could. And I started to brain power it out in live time with all of you helping me and encouraging me, until now this is what I'm doing right now, is traveling with people. We're going to Costa Rica in 4 weeks for a couple of week-long retreats, and making money and helping people and doing so many other beautiful things. But yeah, becoming a healer was something that I've had to evolve into. It's a really weird, almost hush hush thing when you tell people that you work as a healer. Because I take you on vacation and I feed you and I, help you with your plans and I nurture your soul and I do all these things. But what makes me a great makeup artist or person developing your business or travel guide is that I heal people. And so that's my other avenue, is I'm an intuitive healer and work one-to-one and in group programs, helping people heal and shift and just become more whole and it's magic.
That is so beautiful, Lawrie. And I will say, I was supposed to be in one of those Costa Rica trips, but then we had a little surprise baby.
The best surprise. Yes. Not to worry. There's going to be more Costa Rica trips.
Yes.
Like they're already on the schedule.
Okay. I can't wait. Let me know. So I would love to kind of dive in a little bit and go back in time to like the Lawrie who was like, okay, I have this like dream, this vision of what I want to see, which is I would love to monetize this podcast. And like, how did that first start? Like, what made you kind of take that leap to then go from a dream, a vision, to then now like you're having retreats and you're doing, you know, these intuitive healing sessions and you're monetizing your podcast? And I know that's like such a loaded question because it's so much, but like try to go back to like the earliest part that you can remember, because I think for the listener, they're going to resonate with that, where maybe they have a dream, they have a vision of something that they want to see in their lives, but they're just like, oh my gosh, like it's not possible, or it's not there. There's like the doubt, the limitations that come up. And so I would love to kind of hear that part and how you were able to work through that and kind of, and I know it's like it's a process, it's layers.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's actually so cool that you're asking this kind of question, because even just today, like all day long, I've been seeing these synchronicities where I'm like, oh my gosh, spirit, I see the connection now. Like I understand why you led me that way. And you know, it scales out to a year ago, but it's really like way before that, where, you know, like being 22 years in the same industry, you know, like I loved my job and I had a great job. And it also always felt a little bit not right. And what I always looked forward to so much was like the paid vacations and accruing this vacation time and getting airline miles so I could be like, how long can I be gone? Not because I didn't want to be in my life, like I loved my life, but because I was so fascinated by this idea of like removing myself from my daily and getting to go somewhere in a different space and a different time and embrace these people and do my own healing, because I was out of my daily hustle, right? And so for years, the dream was, I want to buy an 8-plex on the beach somewhere and turn it into like a retreat center, right? And this was the dream. And that I would go to salons and I would coach people and I would do wellness events. And then I would sell tickets to retreats where people could bring their salon teams to the beach and we could do all of this awesome work. Like this has been my dream for, I'd say like 15 years now. Every person I'd share it with, like, would tell me a million reasons why it was a terrible idea, you know, like why it wasn't good, why it would kill my career to try and live in a different place while I had this job at home, you know, like why it wasn't a priority, you know. And eventually I was just like, whatever, I'm going to win the lottery one day and then I can be a real estate mogul and I can move to the beach and it'll be fine. But I was like kind of pissed about it, you know, like I was excited and I wanted to do it. And so now it's turned into this thing where I'm going to be gone for 4 weeks to go to the beach to do these healing retreats, right? I have a job where I don't have to ask for time off. You know, like I'm the boss, I'm making my schedule, right? So I'm getting to live on a beach. There's actually 8 rooms at the resort I've rented, which is really funny because I was always talking about an 8-plex. I don't even know like where I got that, you know, number. And then I'm getting paid to live in an oceanfront resort that I didn't have to get a mortgage on, that I didn't have to maintain or deal with any of the drama of like buying real estate. It's actually this perfect, beautiful space because then I can come back home and keep doing all the cool things that I'm doing here.
Yes.
And so it comes through full circle. I had no idea when I was wanting to do that 10, 12, 15 years ago that it would turn into something that was so much easier, with so much less effort, with so much more like flow and vibe with where I happen to be. Like I didn't have to force it. It just kind of started happening. And that process was like the difference between me forcing things and letting things unfold in front of me and really focusing on things like, how calm am I on the inside? You know, like when things out here are going crazy, how much peace do I have on the inside? And learning to cultivate that and which gives you a new freaking attitude about everything. Like it just changes your life. And it so much isn't about the habits like I thought it was. Like now, things that I used to put on a to-do list and beat myself up for not doing, like I got to get up in the morning and I got to meditate every day, like now I just roll with how I'm feeling. And sometimes I meditate at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's fine, like sometimes I skip it all together and I go on a walk with the dog and I sit under a tree and it's fine, like that. Allowing me to ask me what I need in order to take care of myself is the work I've needed to do to allow things to unfold in bigger and better ways than I could have cooked up on my own. And that's coming to you after a year of hardcore trying to figure out why I try to achieve so much and why do I need to be so productive, like that. And from your background, like I come from an industry that's highly, highly productive. And my value and worthiness was attached to what I could produce. And I've had to like slowly unbrainwash myself from that mentality to learn how to take care of myself so I can make these big moves and these big shifts and allow these amazing things to come to me.
Yes, I love that. And I love how you shared about like this idea of instead of trying to like force things, you just let it flow, and how that concept that you have developed, you have applied it not only to creating this beautiful business, but also in even your daily life of like when you're going to meditate and when you're going to do things. And I would love to hear more about how you cultivated that process of, going from like forcing and making things happen to letting things flow, and what kind of guided you in that process.
Ooh, it was like, I wish it was ugly. Like, I'll be real. Like that was only because I was like a super control freak, and needed to be the girl that was going to fix it, or be the girl that was going to plan things out so well that there was no way it could fail because I've already thought about everything that could possibly happen. Right. And that spirit is never going to override my free will to go ahead and do it. Right. And that was so much this shift of I had to let go of the highly productive boss lady mentality. And that a lot of that was a lot of buried fear and, like trauma inside of me, where for a lot of years in my life, things happened that I could not control. And they were catastrophic things in my life. And I learned to always be on guard. And I learned to look out, and I learned to plan everything, because if I didn't, then somebody was going to get hurt, and that everybody would listen to me and I would keep us safe and I would keep us in, good standings, and that nothing was going to be able to hurt us. And that made me step in front of spirit and take the wheel. And I made a lot of amazing things happen, like it's not like my life was a catastrophe. My life was great, but not as great as it could have been if I would have been more trusting of this divine guidance, this divine path in front of me, allowing it to click into place. And so it just meant that I had to admit to myself that I needed help. Yes. And that there was nothing I could have done on my own that couldn't be made better by me dropping in and working alongside the spirit to like create my life, and get really clear. But that stuff is like layered into wounding, like a lot of junk. And so, yeah, I like remember when I started to let go of that identity a little bit and was like, what would it look like? What would my life look like if I didn't have to be that girl? Like, what if I wasn't the person everybody came to when something was wrong because they knew I could fix it? And what if I just like looked out for me and asked myself what I needed? And what I needed was a teacher. Like what I needed were people that could support me, right? Because I was the one that was supporting everyone. And so I started asking for teachers, and they came, and I started to meet people randomly. And some of them have become like so pivotal in my healing journey. Like my mentor in love, Eva Nelson, that I went through all of her intuitive healing courses, and she taught me to develop these gifts on purpose, like that I've always used to create my own intuitive healing business. And now she, like helped me transition out of my day job that I quit in June and have the confidence to step in and create all of these other things for myself and to claim those things and to not feel bad about things that I'm great at and to not be small so other people don't, like become uncomfortable. And so, yeah, like all of that was a result of me doing my own work and intuitive healing. And like I said, it was not pretty. It was a lot of me looking at myself and being like, oh my gosh, I did this. Like nobody else created some of this static in my life that was so painful and hurting me. Like I did this and I can undo this. I just have to get real with like what's good for Lawrie.
Yeah.
And follow that and trust other people's journeys and not take things so personally, like that it's so much this journey of unlearning all the things that we've learned over, like just being alive in during the time we're alive in. And yeah, just becoming more fun and childlike and, kind of revert back a little bit, which is so fascinating and cool to me.
Yes. I love that. I love that because you mentioned how, you had this side of you that wanted to control everything, and that you learned that that side of you was the result of fear and trauma that you went through. And so
Yeah.
I think, what most people do is they just push through it. It's like they push through it and they try to control it, and they want to control it more and more and more. And that doesn't, that can get you, places, right? Like you said, you had this
It works.
successful
Yeah,
career,
totally.
like it works.
Yeah.
But it's like, are you happy in that situation? Right. And
No.
like, or are you stressed or
Yeah.
overwhelmed? And how, by looking at the cause of the trauma and the fear and healing those parts of you, that's how you were able to then get into this place of like being more in the flow. And I think it's such an amazing testament for, our listeners who are maybe feeling like they're trying to control everything because they're so overwhelmed and they're so stressed. And, they've been in their careers for however many years. And instead of pushing through that and trying to just like white knuckle it and make it happen, it's like there's an alternative that maybe is challenging in the beginning as you go through it and you like pull off the layers and you do the healing and you uncover things that maybe you don't necessarily want to uncover. But once you go through that process, it's like there's this beautiful result that's possible for anyone who's in that, a similar situation.
Sure. And it's like, I feel like I've done like 10 years of therapy in 6 months, like that's the kind of massive transformation that we're talking about. And it's so interesting because in that space where, like you said, it's a different kind of heart, right? That for so long I had pushed away. And this is actually, this is some podcaster advice. Okay, here we go. A year from now, when you listen to the podcasts that you recorded, like early on, that I have changed so much in a year, that the things that I was saying on podcasts, like episode 10, 11, 12, whatever, like blow my mind now when I hear like, and I was being totally honest and 100% legit a lot of times. But after a year, I'm like, who is that girl? And it's not embarrassing. It's inspiring, like for me to see how far I've come in a year, really focusing on who I am. And then sometimes seeing who I am and being like, whew, okay, so who would I like to be? Like, what feels a little better than that? And what does that look like for me? And that it is some really big work but you can take it, like we're taught so much. And I think that I had disconnected from the way I was feeling about things for so long that I truly believed that like getting in and feeling those things was going to like destroy me, like I just wasn't going to be able to do it. And that is totally not true, like that now that I'm familiar with the feeling, I know that there's also so much good stuff under that feeling, and freedom underneath it. And that it just kind of like transmutes and adds strength and color and, like beauty to your story. And now that I can recognize that for what it is, like, I know when I feel like that, because you still feel like that sometimes, like you're still a human being. Things still get dark. But you also know it's super temporary, and you have tools, like of ways that you can work with it and through it. And I have support now and people I can call and be like, this is what's coming up, and just learning how to hold space and have space held for you is how you get through that kind of stuff. And it's not as scary as you think. And it changes your relationship with everything, with people, with your job, with substances, like with your boundaries. Like, it changes everything in the best possible way.
Yes, I love that. And when you talked about like that identity shift, right? Like looking at your identity and then letting it go and really deciding like, who do I want to be? Like, what was that process like for you?
You know what? I realized for me, it was so much like just being softer with myself. That being boss lady Lawrie and getting things done, like I had this really tough exterior where I was like, there were a lot of things where like I would commit to doing something and then I like wouldn't want to do it. And I had this really hardcore thing with myself where I was like, you committed and you're going to do it, and you made your bed and now you got to lie in it. Or like things would come up in my life and I'd be like, I don't know if I want to do this project anymore with this person, like it's complicated because of all of this, but I said I would do it. And that I started to give myself a break, and having freedom to change my mind felt really shameful to me, like in the beginning, and really selfish. And especially, like women, I feel like so much we get this caretaker role, and I'm so nurturing and I'm so maternal, which is hysterical because I have no children, like that so like I love people and I love taking care of people, but I will cut my own throat, like to keep you comfortable. I'll set myself on fire, like to keep you warm, just like love and validate me. Right. And that identity meant that I had to abandon myself over and over again. And the shift came where like I was so scared of disappointing people that I loved to do what I needed to do to take care of myself, that there was this decision, like, do I abandon Lawrie or do I abandon these people that I love and care about and I don't want to let down? Like, but in that it just became a no-brainer. You never abandon Lawrie. Like, you just don't ever do it, like no matter what, she is the most important person in this conversation. And that meant the death of this girl that was so toxically codependent. It just meant that everything had to change. And there were lots of people in my life that were made very comfortable by that girl, that when I stopped abandoning Lawrie, man, it was not, like I said, it wasn't pretty. And it was, and I had to be willing to let them be upset and know that that was their own story, like their own healing, their own situation to deal with. And that I had to continue to not abandon me. And that changed everything in my life. And it's still not 100% perfect. Like, I fall into it, like every now and again, but I notice it so much faster where I'm like, oh, look at what I'm doing. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Just because I can doesn't mean I should, and
Yes.
So yeah, like the not abandoning yourself changes everything. And I didn't realize how many decades had ticked off where that was my reality, like for a long, long time. I did things that I didn't want to do because I wanted the approval and the love and the, like attention and validation from people around me. Which is how we're trained to behave, like I didn't just come into that. I was conditioned that way. And it got me the money and the jobs and the opportunities and all of the things. And so since it got me things, I kept doing it, it just didn't lead to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, like I was overworked and underappreciated. And several times a week would have crying outbursts because things were so stressful and I was so not happy. But then I felt so much shame for not being happy because I was like, what the hell's the matter with you? Like, you do makeup for a living and you get to hang out with creative people and you get to make your own schedule pretty much. And you get, like you have all these great things. Like, why are you whining? And so then the self-hate and the self-loathing would come, because I felt like I didn't deserve to step out of something that treated me, like this. Well, no matter how unhappy I was, all of that drama had to stop, and it reclaiming your life when you're in that space, it feels like a failure. especially when you're letting go of a career that you've done for that long, you know, and I was successful at. So now I'm going to stop and create a whole business around a freaking podcast and call myself an intuitive healer and start a business vacationing with people. Like, that sounds reasonable. Like, but I don't want anything to be reasonable. Like, I'm super over reasonable. I'm like, now I'm about miracles. I'm about magic. I'm about doing things that like don't make any sense, but just make you happy. And that is a lot cooler way to be. Like, it's working out.
Oh my gosh, that is so like juicy and so powerful. Like, rewind the podcast episode and listen to that again, because that was so good. And yeah, and it's really inspiring when you can hear from someone who is allowing their voice and that inner guidance to truly guide them. And you know, I would love to hear kind of how you cultivate that. Like, how do you determine when something is like, if it feels good, right, I'm gonna go there, versus maybe there's like a stretching that you need to do and it's uncomfortable. Like, how do you kind of determine what's uncomfortable because it's a growth for you, versus like what is something that you just don't want to do because it's not meant for you? Does that make sense? Like, you know, it's like that kind of fine line where you're determining
totally
that.
And it's okay. So it's so much about cultivating the relationship with yourself. Like, so we hear so much about like having a connection to spirit or the Holy Spirit or a higher power or whatever it is, right? And I know for me, so often as a young person, I turned away from this connection with spirit because it felt really archaic and old and not like of my generation, you know, like, and I also felt this like darkness in me. Like, I was one of those weird kids that wore black lipstick and gloves to the shopping mall and like, and in the salon industry, you know, like we wear all black and it's, you know, like, so it was like kind of an identity thing in my life. But I felt this darkness that I now know is like the shadow side of Lawrie. And we all have these like shadows in us that like rise up when you're not being your best self, you know, when you do feel triggered by something and you react to it, like that a lot of time is your shadow. And it's the stuff that like we turn away from, right? That we don't want to look at and we don't want to acknowledge. But it's also like the path to the healing is embracing that, you know, fully, and learning how to work with the spirit cultivates this strength that even when really tragic things come to you, you just navigate them differently, you know, like you understand that. And it's so funny for somebody who was raised in a United Methodist church, you know, like and whose family members were pastors, you know, and that could quote Bible verses and could sing, you know, like hymns. Like, I hear them now saying things to me that I understand, but not because I went to church, you know, like because I understand it now, like this whole God works in mysterious ways. Like, hello, I'm living it right now, you know, like in the most mysterious ways. Like, even right before I came on the podcast, like I got such an exciting text message about a project that I'm working on. And it's been one of those things that like, I've been so overwhelmed with it that I just am like, you know what, spirit, I'm just taking my hands off of this. I'm letting you do it because I actually have no idea how it's going to come together. I just infinitely trust that it is. And so all I know to do is just to keep doing my work and to be ready. So when you make all of these things happen, I can like step right in and do my Lawrie Wallace thing. And this stuff is like moving into place and coming together. But I was in the bathtub, like laying in a salt bath when the text message came through, you know, like I didn't even have my phone. I didn't get it for an hour, you know, like after it came in, I was taking care of myself when this magic like clicked into place, right? And so much of like learning how to develop this relationship with myself that strengthens this relationship that I have with spirit is understanding that when I do feel overwhelmed or when I am kind of freaking out and spinning out because this stuff happens, that it's time for me to change my physical situation. It's time for me to change my vibration. That's a low vibes place. Like, it feels constricting. I know what it means when I start to follow the spiral down the rabbit hole and I start to worry about things and try and force stuff and like be like trying to figure out all the how. And that's when I need to go on a walk. That's when I need to get in the tub. That's when I need to turn on a meditation. That's when I need to take a nap. Like that's when I need to go outside and look at leaves and notice the tree bark designs and like get in touch with something else. And that those tools help so much in the relationship with myself because I got to hear myself. And so much of that comes with like learning how not to dull that connection. So, I mean, I talk a lot about how much my healing journey has helped me with my relationship with like alcohol, and that I don't not drink, but I don't use alcohol as a crutch anymore to not feel things. To the contrary, I actually really want to feel things because that's what's guiding me in the direction that's to my highest good. And so now drinking has become this thing where I'm like, yeah, I want to go out to a fancy dinner and I want to pay a sommelier to like pair a glass of wine with this meal because it's like part of an experience. But what I don't want to do is come home at the end of the night and drink because I don't want to think about how much pain I put myself through not listening to me all day long. Like it's just not a necessity anymore. And that changes things. And it's not just alcohol, like it's also overworking or overeating or, like just so many things that we use to fill the hole that will never fill the hole. And that the hole gets filled by loving yourself more, listening to yourself more, co-creating with the spirit in your life and like feeling that divine connection. And that stuff is what fills the hole in a way that there's like no more hole and people can see it and things start clicking in place and start happening. And then it's just like, how good are you going to let life get?
Yeah, I love that. So for you, do you feel like your ability, because I talk with a lot of clients and they'll say things like, I know I can, do the meditation or I can do the breath work or I can like go for a walk, but they choose not to sometimes or many
Yeah.
times. And it's like, how do you get to that point where it's like you're listening to your body, to yourself and saying, okay, like I'm going to go ahead and do that because,
Yeah.
is it the feeling, cause is it that feeling that you get from it? Like, okay, now you become like, instead of addicted to like the frustration and the overwhelm, you become addicted to like that feeling good. Like, I know I'm going to feel good if
Yeah.
I do this.
Well, and I think for me, that's like a twofold question, right? Because most of us are so desperately exhausted. Okay. Like that you're so tired that a lot of times you can't go and do something like that because you finally stopped for a moment, which is why all you can do is like lay there in your discomfort, like, or binge watch the, TV season because you can rest, but then it takes your mind off of all of these things that are hurting. Right. And that I needed like a good 2 or 3 months of rest after I stopped the day job. And I didn't really take the whole 2 or 3 months. Like I probably took closer to like 4 or 5 weeks of just like really deep rest and giving myself permission to not be productive and to not need to find my value in what I did that day. Right. Because you don't need to explain your existence to anyone. Like you're worthy because you're here. Right. Like you're
Yes.
breathing. Congratulations. You made it, like, and that and so for most people, and especially for my clients, a lot of times when they are like harping on themselves because they were going to go on a walk every day this week and they couldn't even do it for one day, that they're so desperately tired that the hate that they throw at themselves for not doing the thing that they think is going to help them is so much more damaging to them than not going on the walk. Right. And that this constant shaming ourselves and beating up on ourselves for not doing the thing is what's hurting us so deeply. And we're the ones doing that to ourselves. And that's not easy to stop. Like you got to be so, and I'm constantly like, oh my gosh, it's a new layer of how I beat up on myself. Like I didn't even know I had to pull a lot of layers off to get to the layer I'm at right now, And so I think so much of it is that. And that if we would give ourselves permission to rest, really, really rest, and find things that nurture us in that different way, Like, then I was like at the point where I was like, okay, so I'm going to rest, but I'm not going to watch TV. So what does it look like for me to rest and not watch TV? Well, for a while it was reading books. So I would like find a beautiful place in the house and I would read a book, you know, and then sometimes reading would make me sleepy. And so then I would take a nap. And then before I knew it, I wasn't watching TV. I was like reading books and taking naps, you know, and then I would wake up and the dog would be all excited because I was up and I'd be like, I should take the dog on a walk. Like, even if we just go right around the block once, you know, like fine. And so it became this thing that started to lean on itself because I did it gradually. But in the beginning, it looked a lot like laying on the couch in sweatpants and watching Netflix, you know, like, and that I didn't judge myself through that. Because I had support, right? Like, because I had these healers and teachers that I was working with that were giving me all this permission that, Lawrie, you're expanding, you're growing, you're shifting into this new thought pattern. They had also come out of corporate America, so they knew what I was going through, you know? And I'm out here out of my job for 3 weeks and like a mess because I'm not doing enough. And they're like, girl, it has not even been a blink of an eye, you know? Like, so like the deprogramming of all of that is so gradual, but now it's turned into this thing where like every day I'm like, what do I get to do today? And I plan things really loosely and I give myself lots of room on either side of like all the things I want to do. And oftentimes like I'll get overwhelmed with all the things I'm doing and I'll open up my calendar and I'll just start blocking days out. Like, overwhelm means you're doing too much and it's time to stop and cancel the things you can cancel and block out the time that you can block out and hear yourself. And that gets easier and easier because that feels way better than pushing through.
Yes.
I didn't know. Like, I didn't know until I knew. But it took a village of people to keep reminding me that I had permission to do that.
Absolutely. I love that part where you said to like the overwhelm, it's a sign that you're doing too much. Like
Yeah.
these feelings, these emotions that pop up for us, like they're there for a reason. And
right.
you know, instead of just ignoring them and pushing through it, it's like use it as a sign. Like, what can I clear off? And not feeling guilty for clearing things off and not feeling guilty for taking a nap if that's what you need.
Right. And it's like this concept too, that even canceling things, that the people who really understand that you're looking out for yourself are your people. Like anybody that's going to be bent that I'm maxed out and saying I can't do this because I need to take care of myself and isn't into that vibe, like those aren't my people. And that's totally okay. Because you know what? I wasn't always that person either. I used to be the girl that pushed through, you know, like I used to be the girl that abandoned myself over and over again to keep the obligations and commitments. So I understand what that girl's going through, you know, like I get it. But it changes things when you're not victim to those types of reactions. And it allows so much room and space for you to create what it is that you want to create instead of like playing this silly game with people that are upset because you're not doing things the way that they want you to do them. Yeah. But it's so interesting though, because everybody who knows that used to be the person that shamed somebody else for doing the same thing, you know, like we can all talk about it now, but like I remember there was like a big section, and there still is a lot of things that I go through where I come in contact with people where I want to apologize for the piece in their story that I played where I was so disappointed in them and upset with their decisions, when now I can see they were just taking care of themselves, you know? When you lead teams and you grow teams in corporate America, like people leave and that hurts your business, you know, and you don't want that. And that was a big part of like my controlling boss lady identity that I used to have, was that my job was to get people to stay. And that it felt like such a betrayal when somebody would abandon me to go and live their lives, you know? And I took all of that so personally, that now I can see things from a much different perspective, you know? And that is a really beautiful lesson. And so interesting how many people like come back into your orbit after all of these years, and that everyone's grown up and we can have conversations about things, you know, and like see a little bit more about how that works. That your story is like so important to why you're here, and that there's no shame in the fact that I was learning those things, and that it was probably hard for the people that I was learning it with too, but that was their journey, you know? And so yeah, like it's just a lot of humility, but also like spirit's funny. They're like, oh, you think you're so like high and evolved and zen? Like these things come back around full circle where you just see things from a different perspective for sure.
Oh, yes, totally. It's
Mm.
like things that you thought you healed and worked through. It's like it
Oh
comes
yeah,
back in a new and different way. But it's
totally.
beautiful to be on that journey
Mm.
and to see, like you said, you can look back at a year and see how far you've come. And, for to be able to look back each year and see that growth and that transformation, like what
Mm.
a blessing and what a beautiful thing. And it's so inspiring to talk with you and to hear all of the goodness and juiciness that you shared with us.
Oh,
I'm going to have you come back on the podcast because this
yeah.
is so much fun. And it's so good to just hear you share and to learn from you. Um, Before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to share with the listeners, like final kind of thoughts to wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I would just encourage you to get really clear, like what doesn't feel right and what would feel a little bit better. And
Mm.
like that it's all like tiny, tiny shifts add up to huge transformation sometimes. You don't have to change all of it, like what's not working and what would feel a little bit better.
Oh, I love that. What would feel a little bit better? I love it.
Yeah. I love you. This was so
I
fun.
love you
Thank you for
too.
this.
Yes, of course. Well, if you want to let our audience know where they can learn more about you before we jump
Yeah.
off today's call.
Totally. You can check out my podcast, The Badass Ladies Club. We release every Monday. I'm at Lawrie in the Sky with Guidance on Instagram. And then all of our details for retreats and one-to-one work and whatever else I cook up in the meantime is at www.badassladiesclub.com.
Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you.